This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Wednesday, the 12th of January, 2022. We had talked about Roman society. One of the interesting things about it is that Roman society insisted, because of the way that their weapons and armor were purchased, that those who led in peacetime also took the greatest risks in war. Unlike American soldiers today, who have their gear provided for them by the military, a Roman man was expected to buy his own kit. That means his own armor, his own weapons, all of that. He was expected to independently provide everything he would need except, food. Well, of course, this meant that some Romans could afford better kit than others. And in fact, the wealthiest Romans could afford a breastplate, greaves, a helmet, a shield, a spear, and a sword. Maybe even more. That is effectively full body armor and their shield and sword. Middle-class Romans would probably be able to afford maybe a breastplate but no greaves, certainly a shield and a helmet and a spear. Poorer Romans might not be able to afford much beyond a helmet and a spear, maybe a shield. So the wealthiest, because they were the best kitted out, would serve in the front line of battle, taking the greatest risks, doing the most work. The middle class who worked for them would be in the middle rank, the second rank, reaching over them and stabbing with their spears. The poor would be in the third rank, behind everyone, stabbing with their spears. What this meant was that the social order, patricians and plebeians, was not defied in war, but reinforced. Those people who you followed in war and saved your life by blocking the enemy's thrusts and blows would be there in peacetime, guiding and leading you. And that seemed right and good, because they had taken greater risks than you had. We in the United States, during the American Civil War and during the Vietnam War, did something the opposite of that, and it was damn shameful. In the American Civil War, rich families could pay for a poor man to take the place of Little Sonny Boy, if Little Sonny Boy was drafted. So Little Sonny Boy, because he comes from a wealthy family, doesn't have to serve the colors. Some poor bloke will take his place because he paid money. In Vietnam, they made it a little bit more subtle, but it was the same bleeping thing. In the Vietnam War, the draft boards would not take a student who was actively enrolled in some kind of college or university. If you have a poor background, even if you can make it into college, which wasn't as easy in those days as it is today, you can't stay there forever. College hemorrhages money from your family. You need to make money. So the poor who didn't go to college, or who went briefly to trade school, or maybe just got a bachelor's degree, would then be eligible for the draft. If you dropped out of college or failed out of college, you'd then be eligible for the draft. And so what the wealthiest American families did is they made their Sonny Boys into perpetual students. They got their bachelor's degree. Then they went and got a master's degree. Then they went and got their piled higher and deeper PhD degree. Then they'd go on and get a second PhD. Some people were in college for 12 years or more because they loved to learn, or because they wanted to avoid military service. Only the wealthy could afford to do that. So we had a lot of ghetto kids and farm boys fighting in the the rice paddies of Southeast Asia, but not too many blue bloods. A few, but not too many. That, as far as I'm concerned, belied the American dream. It undermined it. If you have a war so bad that you need to conscript people to fight, everyone should be equally eligible to go, in my judgment. You think about what you believe. But the Romans reinforced their social order by having the wealthiest, most privileged people take the greatest risks in battle. I respect that. The Roman legions, like the Greek hoplites, were composed of, or the Greek phalanxes, that's actually the comparison, were composed of heavy infantry primarily. A Roman legionary, I think there's a picture of one near the end of your notepad. Let's take a look. Yep, last page. Now this is a Roman legionary of the high point of the Roman power, the Pax Romana of the 1st century AD, from the emperors Nerva through Marcus Aurelius. So this is better than most soldiers of the Republic or even the early Empire, and certainly the later Empire had. This is Roman legionary at the high point of their sophistication. But it shows the type of gear a Roman legionary would have. First off, they had a ridiculously large shield. Basically, it's a tower shield. It was rectangular, it had a slight curve to it, and you would walk around with it. And this shield was designed to cover you mostly from your neck down to your knees, maybe even more. It was a shield that you could hunker down behind. Meanwhile, Roman legionaries were armed with a ridiculously short sword. In Latin, the term for a long sword, which is a sword maybe a yard long, maybe a bit longer, it's called a spatha. And what a spatha is used for is slashing attacks. The barbarians that Rome fought, if they used swords at all, spears were actually the most common weapon used in war in those days because it has a longer range. But if a barbarian was going to go into battle with a sword, they'd almost certainly have a spatha. They'd also have a shield, small or medium-sized and round. Why? Because a barbarian was trained to fight as an individual, as a single man. Maybe in a mass of others, but their entire training and experience was fighting as a single man, as an individual. And as an individual, you want a shield that you can move to block and intervene and maybe bash with. And you want a sword that has reach, that you can swing and hit your enemy at some distance. So, a barbarian's kit with a spatha, a longsword, and a smallish shield was designed for a warrior to fight individually. Yes?
That reminds me of when I was reading the Percy Jackson books.
Yep.
In the second series, it was Percy Jackson who's like a Greek demigod, and then Jason Grace was like a Roman demigod, and they decided to like duel with swords, and you could see that the author wrote that Jason's style is more like a poke, and Percy's is more of a slash and attack and parallels.
That's the writer knew what he was doing. Now we're going to get to the sword. The way a Roman is kitted out is not as an individual warrior, but as a soldier in a unit. Everything about the Roman legionary is designed to maximize the power of the group, so that the group is more than the sum of its parts. So the sword is about half, 2/3 the length of a spatha. It's called a gladius. And the shield is large enough to interlock and make a mobile wall. They can make a mobile wall in front. The most famous formation of the Romans is the tortoise or the testudo, where the Romans would have a shield wall in front, to both sides, to the rear, and the guys in the middle would place their shields up so that they'd have basically, it's a mobile shield tank. Tankety going across the battlefield. And if you're in a tight formation, and this is something the Romans worked out, it's a logical extension of the Greek ideas, but the Greeks didn't do this. What the Romans understood is you can't swing a broadsword in the forest. You can't swing a spatha in the midst of a tight formation of men. So you got your shields interlocked and you march forward. And when it's time to strike, you angle your shield, and the gladius and the Roman kit is designed basically for one supreme attack. They can do other things, but an uppercut thrust, not with the edge of the sword in a slash, but with the point of the sword in a stab, in a piercing attack. And the goal was, in one shot, to go under the rib cage of the enemy, into the heart. Gladius goes in, Gladius goes out, next. Roman soldiers were not interested in a fair fight, any more than American soldiers are. We want an unfair advantage, because war is not a game. War is about killing the enemy and breaking their stuff, including breaking their will to fight. So the Romans have almost total cover when they've got their interlocked shield walls. And when they open them to attack, it's the most efficient attack you can have under these circumstances. Now, of course, there are variations, but that's what the Roman legions were designed to do. Close to close range. Now, why not use the big old 14-foot spears, the sarissas, of Alexander's phalanxes? Well, the Romans found the phalanx was clumsy, and the sarissas were clumsy. If the enemy did what the Greeks wanted, what the Macedonians wanted, then the phalanx or with the sarissa, the giant 14-foot spear, worked. But if the enemy was at all flexible, the Greeks had difficulty adapting. The Roman legion could break up into much smaller groups that could still fight effectively. The phalanx was big. The Roman legions, because they used a shorter weapon at the point of contact, were much more able to maneuver. The Greeks had these giant things that they had to carry around with them everywhere. And the Greek shields were not like the Roman shields. They weren't properly designed. Everything about the Roman soldier was engineered. When a barbarian, whether they're a Celtic Irishman or a German, when a barbarian goes into battle, they go in hot. Ah! Boom, boom, boom. Your mother's ugly and she dresses you funny. It's like before a football game. You get pumped up, you get adrenalized. And the barbarians would almost always do this. They, before battle, have this insult attack where they banged on their shields and they did chants and they'd get. I mean, the New Zealand Maoris take this to an extreme with their hakas, which, if you haven't seen, look up the New Zealand All Blacks soccer team. And the New Zealand All Blacks, before every game, do a Maori war dance called a haka. And it's pretty impressive. They even did a little of that in the Lord of the Rings Two Towers movie because most of the guys playing the orcs were Maoris. And so they did a little bit of the haka. Romans don't do that. Romans fight cold, not hot. The Roman, yeah, he'll get pumped up to do the battle. But it's a job. It's not an adventure. The Roman is not there to prove his manhood. The Roman is there to kill for his country. The Roman is there to earn his paycheck. The Roman is there to earn his citizenship. So the Roman army is different from almost every army, including the Greeks, that they fight. Because all the others rely on the football coach method of pumping your troops up and making them wild-eyed, freakish berserkers. Not the Romans. The Romans fight cold. Now think about this. If you're in a fight with someone, or an argument, adrenaline certainly gives you some advantages, but adrenaline makes you predictable. In a Spanish bullfighting ring, in the corrida, the bull is stronger than any man, than any toreador. The bull is more fierce when he gets angry, when they start putting hooks in the bull to bleed him and make him even more furious. No man can match that. The toreador doesn't fight hot. He fights cold. The toreador is a precision surgeon. To bleed the bull, make him frenzied, and then kill him with a single sword thrust to the heart. The corrida, the bullfight, goes back to pagan times, to the Basque country, to a people so ancient they're not even Indo-Europeans, which in northwest Spain, they're not. Actually, northeast Spain. So when Romans fight, they fight cold. And they have gear. Look at the armor. The armor in that picture is the high point of armor making before the 1300s. It's called Bodica segmentada. It's segmented armor. And it looks like the shell of a shrimp or a lobster. What you have are overlying metal plates that allow a maximum of free movement for the soldier, but that cover that soldier with steel. Steel body armor, not iron, steel. And the Romans would go into battle against guys wearing ringmail or chainmail or hardened leather or cloth, heavy cloth. And in the case of the Celts, they would go into battle with guys who painted themselves with magic blue paint called woad. They'd paint their hair with red clay. And the Celts were famous for going into battle completely buck naked except for their blue body paint and red spiky clayey hair. And if you see a bunch of blue naked guys charging down the hill at you with spears, yeah, you might want to run, because all the Romans had was steel body armor. You decide who wins, magic blue paint or steel body armor. The Romans conquered the Celts, the Gauls, wherever they chose to. Just like a modern army conquered China when China depended upon martial arts. This is the Boxer Rebellion of 1900. In a good kung fu movie, the martial artist defeats the soldier. In reality, a rifle bullet kills very effectively, whether you have powerful ki focused or not. That's the way it happened. So you fight cold, not hot. And the ultimate example of this is the pilum. The pilum is the Roman javelin. Now, a normal javelin, which is a throwing spear, is a single shaft of wood with a point on the end. And if you've ever done track and field, you know what a javelin throw is. Modern javelins in track and field are these hollow wooden aluminum tubes. But in ancient times, you're throwing to try to your enemy. It's a ranged weapon, and you throw them in mass. And the Romans used javelins, but they develop a special javelin called the pilum. The pilum is not made of a single shaft. Instead, the pilum is made of a base and the pointy end. The base and the pointy end are connected here. There's sort of a shield covering it. And there's a nuts and bolts arrangement through the center. And I'm exaggerating the offset, but it is an offset weapon. Why? Because you throw a normal javelin at someone and miss, and you've given them a weapon to throw back at you. You throw a pilum at someone, the joint is intended to be weak when it hits anything. Body, armor, shield, ground. It snaps. It doesn't fully break, but it snaps so that the front part of the javelin hangs down. So imagine going into battle with a shield that has a pilum stuck in it, and you've got the other end of the pilum hanging down. That's really obnoxious. It's going to throw your shield arm off. It's going to throw everything off. And if you stop to dig the pilum's warhead out of your shield, you're going to disrupt your formation. You're going to be distracted, and the Romans will be able to kill you. So when the Romans throw their pilums, they're throwing weapons that are designed to break, but not completely, to frustrate the enemy. Now, the American army does the same thing today. In the 1950s, American forces used a real rifle round. the 7.62 by 51 NATO cartridge, which is a big man-killing rifle round. You hit somebody with one of those, if they don't get killed, they're probably at least going down from the trauma. Trees don't stop it very well. It's a heavy round. But in the middle of the Vietnam War, we shift from an M14 battle rifle that shoots one of those big heavy rounds to the M16 assault carbine. The M16 assault carbine shoots a much smaller 5.56 round, 5.56 millimeters in diameter. Now, the Army said we can carry more ammo. Yeah. Why did we shift to a lighter round? It wasn't just to carry more ammunition. And it wasn't because our leaders suddenly became stupid. I don't like the M16. I don't like the AR-15. I like a rifle that shoots a real bullet. I mean, granted, I wouldn't want to get hit by a bullet from an M16. That would be bad. Here's why. The M16 is designed not primarily to kill. It's designed to wound. It is a wounding weapon. Why would our military choose a weapon that fired a much smaller bullet that tended to tumble once it entered an enemy's body? For what purpose would we develop a weapon designed to wound more than kill? Yes?
Do they have to spend resources on soldier?
You kill somebody, you take one enemy off the battlefield. You wound somebody, you take 2 or 3 enemies off the battlefield. The guy who's wounded, mother, which is horrible. I mean, you know these guys. This guy's a manly man, but now he's screaming like a little girl. Why? Because he's been shot, and he's maybe dying. So that's going to hurt your morale. But also, you either have to pick him up in a fireman's carry or drag him off the battlefield. It's better to get 2 guys to take 1 wounded man off the battlefield. So by wounding the enemy, it's calculated that we will take more people out of the fight against us. 2 or 3 people. The wounded guy plus 1 or 2 others. Is that clever? That's clever as far as I'm concerned. I still don't like it, but it makes sense. There's a logic to it. So the pilum isn't as strong as a regular javelin, but it doesn't have to be. It's not designed to be. If you get hit by a pilum, you're going to get wounded or killed. But you're not going to be able to pick up a pilum that missed you and throw it back at the Romans. And it could mess up everything else. So the Roman soldier is a soldier, not a warrior. He's designed to fight in a group, not as an individual. You go into a single-person duel with a Roman a kite shield, a tower shield, and a little tiny gladius against a warrior with a small shield and a spatha, and you're probably going to die. It's not designed for individual combat. It's designed for group combat, and it's really good at group combat. The other thing about the Romans, every Roman soldier is an engineer. Roman soldiers get their hands dirty every single day. What this means is, when the Romans are moving through enemy territory, unless they're dealing with something very unusual like having to quick march to meet forces before a battle, every night before dark they stop. And every soldier is carrying a specific set of tools, and they all know their job. For the next 2 to 2.5 hours, the Romans build a little fortress in the middle of the wilderness. They dig trenches, they put spikes on the outer edge of the trenches, they make a stockade fence, they set up their tents in a predetermined fashion, the same way every single night. They set up cook fires inside. They build a little miniature fortress. It's called the Roman camp. Now, the next morning they take it apart. They march another 20, 30 miles, and then they build the same thing again in a different place. Is the Roman camp a castle that you can hunker down in during an enemy attack? Not really. What it's designed to do is make it very obvious when a barbarian group is trying to attack. So the Romans who are not on watch can get a good night's sleep. If you don't have one of those around you, the enemy can sneak in. Stab, stab, stab. Stab, stab, stab. Stab. And you know it. So you don't sleep well. You constantly, what was that? But if you're behind a wall with sentries and trenches and spikes, and you're in a tent formation and you know the inside of the camp and the barbarians don't, you have every advantage. And that includes the advantage of being woken up in time to strap your armor on and get into the fight as part of a group. So the Roman camp is an advantage. The Romans also are really good at building fortifications. If they're going to stay somewhere for a couple of months, they're not going to be satisfied with the camp. They're going to build a real wall of stone. Or if they build it of wood, they're going to build it thick. And they're going to have platforms near the top of the wall for guys to stand up near the top of the wall looking down on the enemy and fighting down to the enemy. It'll have corner towers that protrude outwards. It'll have a gatehouse or two. It'll have real, concentric rings of trenches and spikes. It'll have a road that crosses those to a very well-defended gate. The Romans are going to build a real little early castle. Also, since these are foot soldiers, the Romans are the Roman legions, who build Rome's roads. Now, Rome's roads, in some ways, are better built than American interstates. First of all, Roman construction uses a type of concrete that's just better than anything we have in the modern world. You make something out of concrete today, and it's going to fall apart within about 100 years. You have to rebuild it. Roman concrete is still there in the Colosseum. It's still there at the Pont du Gard. It's still there at literally thousands of different Roman ruins, because the Romans were able to make concrete in a way that we have lost. And their concrete lasts. It's really, really good. Ours, not so much. So, since the Romans are foot soldiers, they build these roads. First of all, they dig down 5 feet. And they put layers of sand and little rocks and bigger rocks so that the Roman road is going to last without having potholes, without heaving up in the frost, without having mud holes, without going through sinkholes, all sorts of things like that. The Roman road is built to last, of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and the top layer are flagstones, big rocks that are fairly flat. The Italians still use the Roman Via Appia as a highway between Rome and Naples. You can drive a Fiat on a road built by Romans over 2,000 years ago. Now, it's not the entire length. I mean, modern highways and such, but there is still a road that they've paved over that was originally built by the Romans. There are Roman roads throughout the Mediterranean and Northwest Europe that still exist. You can go to Britain and see some sections of Roman roads that haven't been maintained in 1,600 years, 1,700 years, that are still there. You can still use them. The Romans built bridges to cross rivers. And these roads and bridges had one purpose, the same purpose, by the way, that American highways have. In the 1950s, when President Eisenhower proposed and then signed the interstate highway law, they were called defense highways. The interstate highway system was designed to move the American military quickly from one end of the country to the other, and to help cities evacuate quickly in the event of nuclear attack. Now, we haven't kept up. We haven't really built roads aggressively in this country since the early 1970s. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, some good and some bad. With the consequence, though, that American roads tend to be old and on the edge of falling apart in many cases, and there aren't enough of them, so we have traffic problems. More than we should. But the original interstate highway system was designed for cars moving at 120 miles an hour. That's what the curves are designed for. That's what the grades are designed for. Cars moving 120 miles an hour without having to stop, ever. No traffic lights. Not like State Route 95, but more like Interstate 90, which is a defense highway. The Roman highways, the Roman roads were built to move the legions from one end of the empire to the other quickly. And one of the things that Romans did that we don't is they built roads completely straight. They would say, okay, the road's got to go over there. Well, there are hills in the way. We'll cut through them, or we'll go over them. Well, there's a ravine. We'll build a bridge. Well, if we went around, no, we're not going around. We're building straight because you're walking and you want the shortest route between 2 points. Does anyone know why we don't build highways straight? Why our roads undulate, move, and sort of go around the countryside? Anyone want to take a guess as to why a perfectly straight road with automobiles would be a mistake?
Because it could get backed up really easily if there's like one small thing.
That's a good guess, and I think it's not the thing I'm looking for. The truth is, an undulating road can get backed up too. Here's the problem. One of the first highways that we built, a divided highway, was in Pennsylvania, and it's perfectly straight. So, if you're driving at night, headlights, 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 from miles away, headlights. And also, people got sort of road tranced and accidents. And sometimes accidents were head-on collisions at 60 miles an hour, which is not a good thing. So we intentionally build roads that move around the countryside, not because we can't cut through the hills, but to reduce the headlight glare to a reasonable distance and to make sure the driver keeps awake, keeps aware. You're not just going straight. You're having to compensate and follow the road. So modern American highways only have straightaways for a little while, and then they bank, and then they turn, and that's why. So the Roman soldiers, the legionaries, also built the aqueducts. Now, you may not think an aqueduct is a big deal, but try living in a city of tens of thousands of people without sewers. Throughout most of history, most cities didn't have sewers, didn't have proper water. Yeah, so even today, Paris is filthy. What you have is the streets, and people dump their waste in the streets and wait for the rain to take it away. Or instead of using a latrine or a lavatory or a bathroom, they end up using the walls of city buildings. This is disgusting. California's homeless is allowed to revive these old traditions, and it's a public health hazard. You do not want to walk through a town or a city or live in one that has massive amounts of human waste all over the place. You will get sick and die. Cholera and other disease epidemics. So what the Romans do is they understand that without water, a city is unlivable by their standards. But not all cities are built where there's clean water. Well, you have a city on a river. Yeah, do you really want to drink that river water? Do you know what that river water has in it? Everything that's yicky gets dumped in the river. Everything that's dirty gets washed in river water and goes back into the river. So what the Romans do is they find some pristine springs or rivers or mountain lakes, and they connect them to the cities by watery roads called aqueducts. These pipes are above the surface of the ground, and they're usually high enough off the ground so that people on the ground can't easily mess with them. Hey, you know what's going to be fun? I'm going to take this chicken, and I'm going to throw it up in the aqueduct, and it'll rot there, and it'll make the people sick. No, the aqueduct is too high to pull that nonsense. So you got arches upon arches upon arches going over the countryside, and the aqueduct is basically an open water channel with a slight dip in it. And some of them are hundreds of miles long. And they bring clean, fresh water to the cities. With the aqueducts, the Roman cities have public baths, public fountains, public toilets, not U-bend toilets that flush like we have today, but still, public toilets. There's a men's room and a women's room. We actually can't tell the difference between the two. There are rows of seats. You do your business, and beneath you, there's this channel of water that keeps flowing. And so your waste gets taken away. It's still stinky, but it's better than any other system before we develop U-bend flush toilets. And They even have something to wipe yourself with. It's kind of disgusting by our standards. They'd have sort of an acerbic chemical, maybe citrus water or something, with a stick and a sponge on the stick. And you'd use the sponge on the stick to clean yourself off after doing your business, and then put it back in the yucky, citrus stuff for the next guy to use. It's ancient times. Look, it's better than nothing, which is what the Greeks tended to have. Oh, going back in time would be great. Not really. Do you know what people who don't bathe frequently smell like? Imagine an entire city full. In any event, the Romans had baths, so Romans were able to bathe more frequently. The army built all of this. Now, the army marched under the legionary standard that I told you about, an eagle clutching a globe or an orb, which represents the world, with the letters SPQR on it, Senatus Populusque Roma, the Senate and people of Rome. Now, during Rome's early history, it conquers Italy. Rome conquers the Latins. Then it conquers the Etruscans. Then it conquers Magna Graecia. Now, in the course of conquering Magna Graecia, the Greeks call in a nearby king from across the Ionian Sea called King Pyrrhus of Epirus, Pyrrhus, Pyrrhus of Epirus. That's in your notes. It's called Pyrrhic victory. And Pyrrhus of Epirus fights the Romans for a long time. He fights the Romans hard. He beats the Romans much. He finally wins. The Romans are driven away from Magna Graecia for a while. But here's the thing. Pyrrhus's armies, victories, are so costly that they lose more by winning the war against Rome than Rome loses by losing the war. So the Romans build back much more quickly than the Greeks, and they conquer Magna Graecia. If you ever fight a fight and win, but the cost of victory is so hard that it ultimately damns you or dooms you, that's a Pyrrhic victory. As educated people, you need to know what a Pyrrhic victory is because it's an expression that people use. Do you really want to have a Pyrrhic victory? Do you want to win at all costs when the cost of victory is going to destroy you in the future? Do you want to sacrifice so many men, so much blood, so much treasure that you're going to be exhausted? Oddly enough, Britain suffers this after both World Wars, especially after World War II. Britain is actually, in many ways, in worse financial shape than Germany. And Germany had its cities firebombed to ash. How could the victorious Brits be in worse financial shape than the Germans? Well, they ended up taking out loans and loans and loans and loans from the United States, and their economy became completely dependent upon American aid. And when the Americans after the war stupidly stopped the aid, Britain's economy tanked. Britain didn't really recover from World War II until the 1980s. Britain didn't pay off its loans to America until I think 2006. Germany's economy recovered in the late 50s and early 1960s. So did Japan's. That should tell you something. In many ways, the British lose more by winning World War II than the Germans do by losing World War II. That's a Pyrrhic victory. It was a necessary one, though. I'm not calling the British victory over Germany useless. It was necessary, but it came at great cost, not just in terms of lives, but in terms of money. But the Romans eventually conquer Magna Graecia. They then conquer Cisalpine Gaul. They then are going to actually work on eastern Sicily. And one of their last wars in Italy after the Punic Wars is called the Social Wars, the war against the Soci, or the tribes. And the Social War is where some Roman policies really come into play at the end to make the peace. The Romans are not like the Athenians. They're like the Persians when it comes to conquering people. The Romans could care less who you worship as long as it's not subversive. The Romans invite locals who fought them to become Roman citizens by being loyal to the empire, to the republic. If your city is conquered by Rome, you may be better off than had you won the war, because you'll get a new Roman city with baths and a better lifestyle, and you yourself or your children or your grandchildren might become Roman citizens equal to anyone born on the Palatine Hill. What that means is, unlike the Athenians, who treated people that they dominated badly, the Romans said to people they beat, join us. We'll give you rewards for joining us. If you join us in thought, word, and deed, you or your family will become us. You'll be Romans. There are Romans who are black as the ace of spades. There are Romans who are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, creamy-skinned of German stock, of pale-skinned, freckle-faced, red-haired, green-eyed of Celtic stock. There are Romans of all shapes, sizes, and colors. Because to be a Roman meant being loyal to the Republic, learning to speak Latin and Greek, paying your taxes, serving the Republic, later the Empire. The Romans learn this, and every time they are generous in victory, they benefit. And every time they're not, they pay. So they learn, finally, with the social war, to treat their defeated people well, and to invite them to earn Roman citizenship. Now we come to the first of three great wars with Carthage. Rome and Carthage have more to fight about than Athens and Sparta did, because Rome and Carthage are both expanding, and they both want to rule the Western Mediterranean, and they both can. Either Rome or Carthage will defeat the other. So yeah, they're fighting over the future, but they're also fighting because each of them controls half of Sicily. The Carthaginians are strong at sea. The Romans are strong at land. Now, these are called Punic Wars because Carthage was settled by the Phoenicians, the seafarers from Sidon and Tyre and today's Lebanon. The Carthaginians are called Phoenicians, which in Latin is Punicae, or the Punic Wars. The Carthaginians control most of the North African coast. Not all of it. They have client states in Numidia and Mauritania, but they control Africa. They control Western Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. The Romans, by this point, control Italy and Eastern Sicily. The war's cause doesn't really matter much. It's really over who's going to rule the Western Mediterranean, and both sides know it. Now, it's the first of a series of wars that's going to reshape the world. In this sense, the First Punic War is a bit like World War I in modern history. The Romans start out with a better army made of citizen soldiers. The Carthaginians have the best navy in the Western Med, maybe in the entire Mediterranean Sea at this point. So the Romans are in trouble because they're going to lose Sicily because the Carthaginians control the sea. The Romans have a need to learn how to fight at sea, but they don't have any history of it. And then one of those happy accidents of history occurs. There's a storm in the Tyrrhenian Sea, I think, and a Carthaginian war galley is washed up on an Italian beach intact. The crew's dead or injured. The ship has some minor injuries, damage, but for the most part, the ship was taken intact from the ocean and deposited on the beach. Now the Romans have a Carthaginian warship, and they copy it. Every single piece. They take it apart, they reverse engineer it, and they start making hundreds and hundreds of copies. The Romans have taken the most advanced warship in that part of the world, and now they have hundreds of them because they copy it. Same thing happens at the end of World War II. The most advanced bomber in the world is the B-29 Superfortress, built near Seattle, Washington, by Boeing. The B-29 has computerized turrets, mechanical computers, but still computerized turrets in 1944 and 45. It has a completely pressurized cabin. It's so big it can drop the early atomic bombs. It can travel higher and fly faster at those altitudes than any bomber before it. It is a marvel of engineering, and it's a generation ahead of anything anyone else has. But in late World War II, the Russians were not fighting the Japanese, only we. And there were a couple of times when American B-29s couldn't make it back to our island bases south of Japan. So they flew to Russia, which was neutral. We were allies with Russia against the Germans in Europe, but in Asia, the Russians are neutral. 3 B-29s land in Siberia, near Vladivostok, towards the end of World War II. The Russians send the crews home, but they keep the planes. And Stalin, the communist dictator of Soviet Union, the second greatest mass murderer in human history, says, copy. I want my own plane. And so the Russian scientists, who are often prisoners, copy. But there's a problem. One of the B-29s has a military gray interior. One of the B-29s has a military green colored interior. And one of the B-29s has a two-toned gray-green interior. Stalin says copy everything. What will we do? We've got a gray painted interior, a green painted interior, and a two-tone. If we pick one, we're not copying the other two, and Stalin can kill us. They eventually decided on the two-tone. But they copied the B-29, adapting our inches to centimeters. They copied it. And soon the Russians had what's called the Bison, which is the Russian version of the B-29. Or was it the Bull? It may have been the Bull. What?
I just said it was an animal.
It was an animal. Definitely a B word, because Russian bombers at that time were named with Bs. I think they still are. So the Romans copy the Carthaginian ships. But having ships is not the same thing as being sailors, as being mariners. The Carthaginians were expert at standing off and firing arrows and catapults and ballistae at the Roman ships, and of coming in and ramming the Roman ships and then pulling back before the Romans. And the Romans were clumsy at sea. They were land soldiers. But again, the credo of the United States Marine Corps: improvise, adapt, overcome. You see a problem, you don't go, it's a problem! No, you improvise. What's the problem? How do I get around it? You adapt. You develop the capacity to get around it. And you overcome. You never let any problem define you. You never let any problem hold you back. Improvise, adapt, overcome. This is what the Romans did in the First Punic War. We've copied their ships. Now we're going to develop what's called the Corvus. The Corvus is a big ramp with a hook on the one side. And what the Romans would do is they would row up to a Carthaginian ship, and when they got within range, thwack, they would drop the Corvus onto the deck of the Carthaginian ship. The big spike on the bottom would dig deep into the Carthaginian's deck. Now there's a ramp connecting the two ships, and Roman Marines would go across and fight the Carthaginians hand to hand. What the Romans did with the Corvus is they turned sea battles into land battles. And they beat the Carthaginians at their own game. At sea, the Carthaginians ended up being defeated by the Romans, who turned sea battles into land battles. The result of the war, which was largely fought in the seas around Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica, was that Rome got all of Sicily, all of Sardinia, and all of Corsica. Roman victory. Punic War won. Hoorah. However, it's not over. Because Hamilcar Barca, the greatest Carthaginian general of the First Punic War, is going to raise his boys to become vengeance weapons against Rome. And one of those boys' name is Hannibal. We'll get back to him tomorrow. Questions, comments, thoughts? By the way, people have asked, how do we study for the history final? Here's how you study. You study the quiz that you're going to get on Friday. You study also every exam I've given you. I create my midterm exam from the exams you've already taken. So if you study the exams, you should be fine next week. Any questions about anything? Yes?
On the finals, are we going to include any of this Roman stuff that
Yes.
we're going over?
Yes, because that's why I'm having you take the quiz on Friday. By the way, the quiz you take on Friday is not going to be part of your second quarter grade. It'll be a third quarter grade so that you'll have time to correct it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah. So, how you let us rewrite the questions for half credit? Do we get that on the final?
No, you do not. Midterm exam is what it is. So, hopefully you'll study and do well. Any other questions, sir?
This just goes over everything.
Everything from the lead up to 9/11 all the way to the end of the Punic Wars, which we'll do tomorrow.
Anything's
Anything on the exams or on the quiz I'm giving you Friday. Okay? I guess that's it. Thank you. Come again.